My name is Cindy Schaarschmidt, and I am originally from a town called Goerlitz, Germany. It's a really small town on the border to Poland, in the east of the country. And I have lived in Tacoma for over 10 years and over 15 years in the United States. Prior to immigrating to the United States, was mostly spent in Germany. I spent my youth there, my childhood, I went to school there, and I was born and raised in what used to be called East Germany. And so that meant that I grew up in a country that was pretty isolationist and socialist at the time, and it meant that as a child I wasn't really able to travel much outside of East Germany and a few other socialist countries that neighbored Germany. And so, very different life experience in my at least early childhood than what I experience now. And I was 11 years old when the Berlin Wall eventually fell, and that meant shortly thereafter that Germany reunified and became one country. And so, overall, I've spent more time in reunified Germany than I have in East Germany, but it still shaped my life in pretty significant ways, that early childhood experience. And I still remember going to a couple of protests that eventually led to the fall of the Berlin Wall with my parents and my younger sister, both in my hometown. And those were mostly peaceful demonstrations that were like candlelight vigils. And so it was a long time ago, but I still remember going to those and holding an empty jar with a candlelight in it, because it was meant to signify a peaceful demonstration for more democracy, a more open country, the ability to travel, that kind of stuff. Some of the differences in East Germany they didn't impact me quite as much because I was so young, but it was a really repressive regime that meant that a lot of people were afraid to speak their mind because there could be some pretty serious repercussions if you did, for example, criticize the government. I was 11 when the wall fell, so that didn't necessarily impact me personally, but I noticed that, of course, for my parents and other family members who were older, and the way that they had to be careful around what they said. The other thing that I think is something that I deeply understood and felt at the time was that we had extended family that lived in a city called Hamburg, in what used to be West Germany. And they needed special permission to come visit us in East Germany, and it was even harder for us to go visit them. And what that meant most specifically is that as a child never traveled to West Germany before the two countries reunified. And my parents were able to travel there, but never together, because the idea or the East German government was afraid that they might just never come back. And so that was just not allowed. You were not allowed to travel to West Germany with your spouse or your children. And I really liked the great aunt and uncle that we knew at the time. They're no longer around. And it was hard not being able to go visit them in Hamburg and having to wait for them to come see us. And I still remember visiting them for the very first time after the Berlin Wall had fallen, and it was this epic train ride that took I don't even know how many hours because just trains. Actually, trains between East and West Germany, train tracks or lines didn't work super well at the time because the two countries had been separated. So anyway, it took forever to get there, but I still remember how emotional it was to walk up to their apartment and see them in their city for the first time. So that was pretty exciting. And then some of the other things that were different was that there were a lot of things that you just couldn't buy in East Germany. So Like one of the things is we had very limited fruit offerings, so only the things that grew basically in East Germany and neighboring countries, but things like citrus fruit and bananas were really hard to come by, and there were lots of other things like that where there was just limited things to buy, and some things were more rationed and just generally harder to find. Some of the differences between the United States and Germany, I think about this a lot, of course, and every time I go back to visit family, I'm reminded of those differences more so than when I just live here, because I've gotten so used to being in the United States that sometimes my family thinks of me as too US American now, of course. But I mean, one of the things that is very different is I would say that Germany has much more of a focus on environmentalism. I mean, Washington State, in the grand scheme of things, does relatively well in that area, but if you were in a German city of a similar size to Tacoma, you would see a lot more people biking and walking and taking public transportation to get around. So that kind of commitment to active transportation and to protecting the environment is something that is very different in Germany from what I'm used to here. And then I think another area is that I think it's easier to make friends in the United States or in Tacoma than it was back in Germany. Germans have a reputation that is true, that they're a little bit harder to get to know, and Germans are awful at small talk, and which makes getting to know people and making new friends a lot harder, I would say, than it is here. One other thing that is a difference between the two places is how much people smile or don't smile. And this is another area that really interests me and fascinates me that I've read about. But Germans really do smile less than people in the United States. And one of the reasons that I've read about is that countries that are more homogenous tend to smile less. And countries that are more heterogeneous, like the United States, use smiling as a way of signaling to the person that you're smiling at that you're safe and that you mean well. And there is not as much of a need to do that in countries that are more homogenous, which historically Germany has been, and other parts of especially Eastern Europe. So that's been a really interesting difference to note too, because if you travel in Germany and, for example, you're on the subway or on a bus, it always feels like people are kind of staring at you or being mean to you because they're not smiling as much. So I like the fact that people here smile more and are just sometimes randomly offering compliments. You know, you'll walk down the street and somebody will comment on your haircut or your outfit of the day. And those kind of personal connections, they're small, really small in nature, really make me happy. And that's something that folks in Germany don't do as much. In fact, every time my parents come to visit, my mom comments on that because she gets sometimes compliments here when she's here, and she's always happy about it, and seems convinced that would never happen in Germany. The other thing too that I've noticed about the United States, I mean, there's still a lot of problems in the United States. There's racism, there's sexism, there's other kinds of exclusion that are happening in the United States, without a doubt. But there are also really progressive social movements and schools of thought in the United States that I do not think are as prevalent in Germany. And so, you know, things like immigrant rights movements or, you know, organizations that focus on LGBTQ issues or trans rights, that is something that I really appreciate as well about, I'd say, Tacoma in particular and Washington State, who are, I think, overall a little bit more progressive than maybe other parts of the country. Germany is not as far along in some of those areas as Tacoma or Washington State is. The love of the outdoor activities is something that I know both from Germany and from Washington State. So yeah, hiking and being out in nature, being by the water, that is something that is important to me and that I know from back in Germany, and I very much enjoy here as well, and with friends also. So that's something that strikes me as similar. And I think the longer I'm away from Germany, the more I'm realizing that there are some things that I miss about it or that have shaped me in important ways. And so it used to be that I cooked almost no German food or baked no German goods because I'm vegetarian, and traditional German cuisine is not very vegetarian friendly. But the longer that I'm away from there, the more inclined I am to maybe try some recipes that I remember from when I was younger. And so one of the things that I absolutely do every year is bake cookies around the holidays. Germans are big at celebrating Christmas. And so I take time to bake several different types of Christmas cookies that were handed down to me by my mother and maybe even her mother. So I use her recipes for making cookies, and then I decorate the house a little bit with German Christmas ornaments that I've purchased over the years. And so that's something that I feel a certain nostalgia for, because around the holidays is usually when I most miss my family and when I'm reminded of some of the traditions that actually do have meaning for me and that I enjoy. One thing maybe to note about schooling first is that because I started school when it was still East Germany, the first language besides my mother tongue that I learned was Russian, because East Germany had really strong relationships with what at the time was the Soviet Union, and all young kids, students, were required to learn Russian, and that is a language that I ended up studying for the duration of my schooling in Germany, so all the way through high school. I don't, unfortunately, retain much of it, but it was a pretty exciting language to learn at the time. And then, I finished high school and ended up going to university in Germany, to a place called the University of Leipzig. And I have degrees in American Studies and Communications. And so that degree in American Studies is a big reason why I'm here now. But to maybe back up just a little bit, one of the reasons why I decided to pursue a master's degree in American Studies was that when I was a junior in high school, my family hosted an exchange student from the United States who still is, exactly my age, and she went to school with me for almost the entire school year. She lived with my family, and she became a second sister, a third daughter to my parents. And that experience of living with her, going to school with her, becoming close to her, really made me interested in the United States. I'd always had a really, really strong interest in languages. I love speaking English, and I know other languages too, but it was that experience of meeting her, and then her family visited while she was living with us as well, that really made me realize, oh, wait a second, I really actually like American English better than British English, which British English is what we learned at school. And so it was sort of that experience of getting to know her that made me want to learn more about the United States, about the language, its culture, literature, history, all of that. So I went to school for that. And there had been an opportunity to study abroad while I was still a student, but weirdly at the time I wasn't ready to go to the United States, even though I was studying American studies, but I just went to the UK instead. So I wasn't ready to go to the United States necessarily as a student, but as I was getting ready to finish my master's degree, I realized that, okay, I've spent 6 years studying this place. I need to actually go live there for a while. And what I ended up doing is apply for a fellowship called the Fulbright, and I ended up receiving that scholarship and came to the United States as what's called a Fulbright foreign language teaching assistant, and I taught German at a small university outside of Chicago. I was meant to be a teaching assistant, but when I arrived, I realized that there's no teacher of German, so I ended up being the person who taught German classes, and that was a fun experience, but also a growth experience because I felt a little underprepared to be a teacher, but it was still a really, really fun experience. And I lived in Chicago at the time and made some great friends, some of whom I'm still in touch with. And even though initially I thought, okay, this is going to be just a one-year experience, right? This is what the Fulbright does. They send you abroad for 1 year, and then the expectation is that you return back to your home country. Well, about 5 weeks or so before my Fulbright experience was over, I met the person who's now my husband, and he's from the Midwest originally, and he's a big reason why I ended up immigrating to the United States. And even though I would say that I had a desire to stay in the United States a bit longer even before I met him, but that really solidified that desire. And there was a lot of back and forth. I didn't stay in the United States right away because I just wasn't able to, but eventually, after living in Germany with my husband for 3 years, I did immigrate to the United States in 2010. The process of immigrating to the United States was quite involved, as you might imagine. I had to apply for a green card to come to the United States and to have the right to live here long term, and I was able to apply for that green card because I was married to a U.S. citizen, and I remember it was a pretty involved process that took both time and money to complete. And so, my husband and I had to prove that our marriage was what's called bona fide. It was real, and so I remember submitting letters and photos and all kinds of documentation to prove that we were truly married and had been for quite some time. And then submitting the application for the green card. I don't remember exactly how long it took or how much money it cost. I just remember it taking some time. And at the time, my husband and I were still early in our careers, and we didn't have a ton of money at the time. And that meant that we actually needed my husband's father to co-sign a letter that basically said that if we weren't able to provide for ourselves, that he would be responsible for us financially. We never had to take advantage of that, but it was a part of the process. And so once the green card application was approved, we essentially packed our bags and decided to move back to the United States. We moved to the Philadelphia area at the time because my husband was starting a graduate program at Rutgers University in New Jersey, which is right on the other side of the river of Philadelphia. And it was, I think, unlike the first time that I'd lived in the United States, where I thought, okay, the first time I thought, okay, this is just gonna be for 1 year, and then I'll be back in Germany or maybe someplace else in the world. This time around, it was definitely a more emotional experience, just because I knew that it was likely going to be more long-term than the first time around, and it made me realize that this is real in ways that it maybe hadn't been the first time around, and being away from family was hard and still is. In many ways, I feel very privileged because I come from a country that is not facing a ton of difficulties immigrating to the United States. And again, I already had pretty strong language abilities. I have a graduate degree, so there were lots of ways that sort of helped that process of immigrating to the United States. I think the hardest part about the process was the fact that the only way that it seemed like I could gain access to living in the United States would be through my husband. And as somebody who, I would call myself a feminist, and so the need to rely on a spouse for entry into the United States didn't quite feel right. If I had my choice, I would have wanted to maybe find a job and have the ability to immigrate to the United States because of a job, as opposed to relying on a spouse. And then there's quite a bit of cost and time involved, and I think the part that was maybe the most off-putting was how much of my personal life and my relationship I had to lay open in order to gain access to the green card. Because the government or USCIS really wants to know that your marriage is real and that you did not just get married because you wanted a green card. And so you have to send in pictures, you have to send in letters, you have to write a statement yourself that shows that you've been married for a while, that you know each other's families and that kind of stuff. And that felt like prying for a little bit too much information. It felt more definite than the first time around, and that was both really exciting but also a little sad, because it meant that I wouldn't be able to just see my parents on a weekend. Right now it's a much bigger production to go visit them or for them to come here. But it was also, like I said, a really exciting time because I got a really cool job at Drexel University in Philadelphia at the time. My husband was starting a graduate program, and it was an opportunity to start something new together as a couple. So that part was definitely exciting. And but it also, in very practical terms, meant it downsizing considerably. I think we literally each had 2 suitcases and a backpack when we moved here. So we sold most of our furniture, all of our furniture, or gave it away that we had in Germany. We gave away or sold books, and my husband has a bunch of instruments. So, we really just came with a couple of suitcases and ended up moving into a furnished house when we first arrived because we had almost nothing and had to start from scratch. We were living in Philadelphia and I was working there, and for Thanksgiving in 2013, we went to the Poconos, which is a set of mountains in Pennsylvania. And it was just my husband and I, and we stayed at this really cute B&B and did a lot of hiking, and realized that after living in major cities, we were really done with bigger cities and wanted to live someplace that was a bit of a smaller city and that had access to nature and hiking and things like that. So we decided then and there that it was time to leave Philadelphia and that we would find someplace new to live. We kind of made a short list of states or places that we would consider moving to. Tacoma was not initially on that list because I didn't know about it, honestly. And what ended up happening is that I saw a job posting for a position at the University of Washington, Tacoma on a listserv that looked really interesting, and that I thought, oh great, this is a really great fit for who I am and what I do professionally. And I decided to apply for it, ended up being selected for the position, and that's how we ended up in Tacoma. I didn't know much about Tacoma before I applied for the position, but as I always do when a new opportunity presents itself, I spent a ton of time researching the place and getting to know what the city is about. And the more I learned, the more excited I was about moving here. I mean, I love the fact that it is a port city, which means that it feels incredibly global in a way, right? It's connected through trade and other relationships to many parts of the world. And as an immigrant, that really matters to me. And so the ability to hear and speak different languages is important to me, and that's something that Tacoma certainly offers. And the other thing that really meant or was important to us was the ability to go out in nature and the outdoors, and Tacoma certainly has lots of that as well. And it's just beautiful. It's beautiful. It's just the right size city, and we've really both enjoyed living here a lot. I work now at Pierce College District, and I serve as the executive director of international education there. So international is something that is a part of my life, of me as a person, of my work. And I've been at Pierce College now for about a year and a half, and I oversee a team of people there that helps bring international students to Pierce College and then supports them while they're there. And then the team also helps create opportunities for our domestic students to either study abroad or to participate in some form of global learning. So that idea of global education, global learning, languages, very much a part of my daily professional life. And then I live in Tacoma in the South End with my partner and my dog. And one of the things I really love is biking. I try to bike as much as possible, and not necessarily for exercise, but to commute. So I bike to work, even though it is almost 9 miles one way, and I try to bike as much as possible. I don't get around to doing it every day, especially this time of year, but I bought an e-bike when I started working at Pierce College because the commute was a lot longer than at my previous job, and so I just love biking through Tacoma and then in through actually University Place and over to Lakewood, and seeing all the different scenery along the way. It's quite an interesting commute for sure. I do a lot of bike advocacy in Tacoma as well. I was part of a group called VeloFemmes, which is a women's focused group that organizes bike rides and bike-related events in Tacoma. So I'm always trying to get more people to ride their bikes, and to ride their bikes for transportation mostly. And so that's one area. And then I also was on a committee that helped advise the city of Tacoma on bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure projects. And so I care deeply about making Tacoma more friendly for people that walk and bike. And so that's been fun, and it's been exciting to see lots of new bike lanes and sort of more people on bikes, certainly now than when I first moved here. So biking is an important part of who I am. And then I love languages, and I organize a French conversation group in Tacoma as a way to practice my own French. And when I first arrived in Tacoma, there wasn't a group, as far as I could tell, that got together to speak French, so I started one, and 9 years later, we're still meeting, and it's fun to get together with a purpose of speaking French with each other. One other way that I'd say I contribute to Tacoma is I was recently elected president of the World Affairs Council of Tacoma. I've been going to their events for some time and then joined the board a while ago. And again, was recently elected president of the organization, and that's one other way that I contribute to Tacoma and help celebrate some of the global connections that we have as a city, and that sort of brings, again, opportunities to hear from folks that work in international relations and trade and what have you, and offer those perspectives in programs that are geared towards the public. So it's been very exciting to be active in that organization as well. What I'd like people to understand about immigrants is that there's incredible diversity among us. There's immigrants to the United States and to Tacoma in particular from so many different parts of the world, and who all have very different reasons for immigrating to the United States. And some are maybe coming here because they met the love of their life, who is from the United States. Others might be coming here because of an economic opportunity. And so just really understanding that there's incredible diversity among the immigrant community in Tacoma, and that there's lots that we contribute to life in the city of Tacoma and in the country as a whole. Advice I have for people immigrating to Tacoma, I would say just take time to get to know the city and get involved and meet people here. I think one of the things that for me have made Tacoma feel like home is, well, the friends that I've made, and then also some of the organizations that I've been involved with. It just really makes me feel that I am a part of this community and an important part of this community. So really taking advantage of what the city has to offer, and sort of recognizing that you as well have something to contribute. I've lived in the United States now for over 15 years, and I feel very much at home in the United States and in Tacoma in particular. But there are still moments where I am very clearly reminded that I'm not from here originally, and that I didn't grow up here. And those are moments when, say, my friends or colleagues will talk about TV shows that they watched growing up, or famous people that they know from 20, 30, 40 years ago. And I have a pretty good grasp of what's going on in the US at the moment, but I didn't live here 30 years ago. And so those are always the moments where I feel the most like an immigrant, because they're saying words and names that I just don't know quite what to do with them. So that's usually some situations that where I'm reminded that I'm an immigrant to this country, which at other times I maybe almost forget because I've been here for such a long time and feel so integrated here. And then the other part is that I remember my friends and I were spending a weekend on the coast maybe, and it was a birthday of one of my friends, and one friend asked the question about what we were doing when we were in second grade. And everybody started answering the question, and at first I thought, I don't remember what I was doing in second grade. That was a really long time ago, until I realized, wait a second. I may not remember exactly what I did in second grade, but what I did realize is that my experience as a second grader was so very different from what my friends did in second grade. And so what I mean by that is, again, I'm from East Germany, so when I was in second grade, it was still very much socialist East Germany. And there were expectations put upon young people. Like, for example, we all had to join a youth organization called the Young Pioneers. And that was, and as part of that, you did certain activities. So, for example, maybe once a month or something, we would get together and drink tea out of what's called a samovar. It's like a Russian tea vessel. I don't know quite how to describe it, but we would get together and drink tea and then write letters to our pen pals in the Soviet Union, because everybody had a pen pal in the Soviet Union, and so we would do that. And then we would also, about once a month, go out and collect paper to recycle. So at the time, there was no recycling that would, they just put in a bin outside your house and then they come pick it up. So young kids would go door to door and pick up these nicely bundled pieces of like stacks of newspaper, and then take them in a little hand wagon to the recycling place. And we would get very little money for that service. And then the other thing that we would do is collect acorns and chestnuts for the local zoo. And that, those were things that I did in second grade as part of that youth organization that I don't think my friends here did when they were in second grade. So it's, again, sort of reminding myself that, oh, wait a second, I guess growing up, things were a little different than for many of my friends.